Because ideas are power.
Absolutely.
They don't want us being powerful.
And it is their worst fear that we link up with other indigenous people who have these advanced, sophisticated politics and ways of upholding their traditions and culture and ways of life.
The truth is, no one of us can be free until everybody is free. No one of us can be free until everybody is free.
Welcome back to the Solidarity Index. I'm your host, Zaire Lauren, aka the artist El Haz. In this episode, we're doing something a little bit different. We're calling it the Surge Series, a podcast-to-podcast act of solidarity. The definition of surge is simple. It's a sudden, powerful forward or upward movement, especially by a crowd or by a natural force such as the waves or tide. And that is what we're trying to create here by lifting up other radical podcasts we admire. A surge of solidarity as we share communities and continue to build together. In our first Surge Series event, we have the great honor of sharing a conversation between the host of Indian Collective podcast, Land Back for the People, Nick Tilson, and his guests, Demetrius Johnson, Kylie Guy, and Jennifer Marley from the Red Nation podcast. This episode was taped 1 year ago, but remains more relevant than ever as the U.S.-sponsored genocide in Gaza reaches horrific lows, and we brace for open fascism from the incoming administration. Nick, Demetrius, Kylie, and Jennifer talk about how it's impossible to understand America's genocidal partnership with Israel without understanding indigenous people and the land back movement here in the so-called U.S. They reflect on what they've learned through solidarity delegations to indigenous lands in Palestine, Venezuela, and around the world. And they explore how the power of their ancestors flows through their actions today.
Almadakiapi, Nick Tilson, Amachiapi, Chantea, Washtenape, Chuzapalo. This is Nick Tilson, your host here at Land Back for the People, here at our studio in Mini Luzaha. It is 2024, and this is the first episode of season 2 of Land Back for the People. In last year's season 1, we covered a wide variety of topics ranging from what it means to be an abolitionist, to the legal struggles for land back, to the fight and freedom for Leonard Peltier, all the way to fighting for land rights and indigenous conservation in Alaska, all the way to the work around kelp farming in Alaska, to the awesome creative resistance work that we're doing in the movement. Wide variety of topics are covered last year. And this year, as we kick off Land Back for the People Season 2, we're going to mix it up a little bit this year. We are actually going to be doing a couple different podcast swaps where we're swapping attendance on podcasts with other folks that have podcasts. And the very first one is going to be our podcast and our guest that will be coming on the show today with the Red Nation. And they have the Red Nation podcast, but they are also a political movement that's fighting for indigenous liberation and doing amazing work around standing in solidarity with the Palestinian people, fighting for indigenous land rights. And we're going to hear about the history of the Red Nation. We're going to hear about some of the work that they're doing as community organizers in their community. We're going to talk about why they started a podcast, some of the things that they cover on their podcast, and some of the things that they're about, their politics, why they exist in the world, what are they fighting for. All throughout the indigenous world, there is indigenous people fighting in different avenues, in different ways for liberation. And they're doing so against huge challenges And this year, we're going to get into some of those challenges. We're going to talk more about the cross-intersectionality of the land back movement and Indigenous people. That when there is advancements to both protect the land and fight for Indigenous people, it actually means a more just and equitable world for all people in Mother Earth. We're going to get into the meat of what that means in this season of Land Back for the People. You know, we are in an important time as a people globally. And we're gonna jump into those things this year. And so, this particular episode, we're gonna have our guests, Kylie Guy, Demetrius Johnson, and Jen Marley, who are all part of TRN, the Red Nation, and we're excited about what we're gonna hop into coming up here. So sit back in your seats, get ready for some badass young Indigenous people who are throwing down for their community, who are throwing down for their liberation, who are doing organizing, who are growing. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why they've been up here. We've been building with one another, working with one another. So we're not just on these podcasts talking shit. We're actually building, we're building relationships with one another that can lead to liberation of our communities. So, Land Back for the People, Season 2. We are here with the Red Nation. In Oglala country, we call it the Red Nation. So I'm gonna, with our amazing guests, Demetrius, Kylie, and Jen, I'm gonna give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. I'll send it over to D first.
All right. How Matakiape. No,
Hey!
Badass of the Badlands, Mitachiape. No, my name is Demetrius Johnson. Shoot, I might as well just say it in Dene too. Give my intro. Twitter Nishle. How do sit na Jenny Bushes chin. Sanji can Ada Shache. How do Twitter Ada Chanelle. Twithlana Dena Sha. Ado Akut Ego Dene Hestin Nishle. Yeah, I come from a little community outside of Ganado called Twithlane. But I've been a member of the Red Nation since 2015. It's coming up on almost 9 years. So it's good to be here in Lakota country.
Yate, my name is Kylie. I'm Dene. I am from the Navajo Nation, also a member of the Red Nation and Red Media. I come from a community called Navajo, northern New Mexico. Really excited and nervous to be here. I'll pass it to Jen now.
Hoaku, my name is Jennifer Marley. I'm from the Pueblo of San Ildefonso, a longtime TRN member. Happy to be here, out here, in Lakota country.
So all of you who said we didn't bring Dene's and Pueblos onto the Land Back for the People podcast, you're wrong.
Hey.
So checking you out in the comment section. We got Dene's and Pueblos here today.
At the same time.
Even at the same time. Yep. So, but we're gonna start off, for some of our listeners and viewers out there for Land Back for the People. Want to hear a little bit more about what is the Red Nation? How did it start? What is some of the origin story of it?
Wow. Okay. So this goes way back. First of all, the Red Nation is just a continuation of 500 years of resistance. Mm-hmm. We do not make a distinction between, us and the ongoing traditions of resistance that have existed since the inception of colonialism. We're simply a continuation of Red Power and all forms of Indigenous resistance, but we started in 2014.
That's when that continuation kind of happened. Kind of happened, right?
We were inspired. Well, first of all, Red Nation formed as a response to rampant border town violence in various border towns in the Southwest. A border town being a city or town that borders Native nations, where Native people are susceptible to rampant state and vigilante violence. And so there was a big anti-police brutality movement that happened after an unsheltered man named James Boyd was shot in Albuquerque. And then just a couple months after that, two Diné relatives, Cowboy and Rabbit, were murdered by Hispano teens, just in cold blood, in a modern case of Indian rolling, which is an old term that our predecessors like John Redhouse and early Red Power movement leaders used to describe border town violence.
I guess how me and Jen came into the picture was we were going to school at the University of New Mexico. We were serving as members and also in leadership capacities with another Native organization at UNM called Kiva Club. And the formation or the collaboration between Kiva Club and the Red Nation at that time came from trying to establish Indigenous Peoples Day during 2015. First at like the university level, but then at the city level, and eventually the state level. But like that's how I became politicized, was through Kiva Club, and then meeting Nick Estes, our comrade and the person who actually brought me into organizing Cheyenne Antonio, who was the president at that time of Kiva Club, introduced Kiva Club and Red Nation, and that's kind of like how, that's how I got involved. That was my kind of like intro into the Red Nation. But just speaking about Kiva Club, so Kiva Club also has like a long legacy of resistance. It actually started in the 1950s at the University of New Mexico. And it started as a social club for Native students being introduced into the college scene atmosphere. So it was like it was a space for Native students to actually just be Native at a place where, they're just coming from the reservations. But during the 60s and 70s and 80s, Kiva Club was really instrumental and a key part of the Red Power movement in the Southwest. So it has a beautiful, beautiful history.
Without Kiva Club, there's no Red Nation.
Exactly.
Just want to hammer that in. But our earliest campaigns were in response to instances of border town violence, doing campaigns, doing on-the-ground actions. And then a lot of people came to know us nationally and internationally for our Abolish the Racist Steal campaign, which tied into a number of other national and international movements to abolish racist imagery like the Confederate flag and Harvard's racist steal. And that just kind of spilled into even more campaigns challenging revisionist history in the Southwest. And we saw that really come to like an apex in 2020 with the removal of toppling of Confederate monuments all over the country, or, racist monuments all over the country. So I would consider Red Nation's early years to be like a predecessor to that we saw culminate more recently.
Absolutely. And I think I love the framework of that we're always on a continuum, right? We talk about that in the Land Back movement. Indian Collective talks about that too. Like we're on a continuum of Indigenous resistance. The same blood of our ancestors runs through us, who made stands against the United States government, who made stands to stand up for our land and for our people. And I think that framework is always important because I always say movements flow with the people. Organizations and entities, like, they come and go. They're tools for change. But the people is where that genetic memory lives. Lives in our blood. It lives in our spirit, and so we're continuing it on. And so in so many ways, we are often answering the prayers of those who have come before us. And therefore, we're also making intention and prayers for future resistors, And so I always think about that from a spiritual context, because sometimes we get into the hyper politicized things that we're doing and forget that we're on a spiritual continuum too, and so I appreciated that reference. And Kylie, you something about the Red Nation inspired you to get involved. What was it? Why did you decide?
Oh gosh. Well, I was a student, and I was sort of just bouncing around trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my time and like what skills I wanted to learn and just how to be purposeful. And in school, I wasn't really getting that. Like, it was, to me, like in my schooling, it was more like being an entrepreneur or like being in business or kind of more like it was focused more on being an individual and how do you be something different. And so Red Nation was always kind of on my radar in my early my time at university. And so IPD was the moment where I drove, at the time I was in Durango, going to school in Durango. So I drove down to the IPD happening in Albuquerque. And that to me just showed, there was so much power. And all the Red Nation members there were just very vocal and very just like in the front. But they were also demonstrating to me like, oh my gosh, I could have that same sort of empowerment too, or power. I just have to like, have the confidence to bring it out, And so from then I was paying attention to Red Nation and what they were doing and who the members were at the time. And then I went to an early Native Liberation Conference in Albuquerque. It was in a little house in a neighborhood. So I decided to check it out. And there it was totally different politics from what I was learning in school. And it was more so geared towards people power and thinking outside of like what we're taught, like outside the U.S. government, outside of being like a dependent of the government, and really just sort of like seizing, your the like intellect Native people have, but also just this whole history of movements and resistance. So, and I got to learn from Jen. Jen was like the person who, sort of reeled me in and introduced me to Red Nation members. She invited me to the meetings and she sat down with me to sort of get like an idea of what I wanted to do in the Red Nation. And yeah, so to me, it just felt very focused on like not being different, but to just be proud, to be an Indigenous person, to be proud to be involved in a movement, to be proud to carry on like the history and like the legacy of resistance and who the revolutionaries are, and sort of just like embody those principles, that commitment, the spiritual aspects. And yeah, so from then on, I was just like, this is for me. This is what I've been looking for. Like, this is what I've been praying for. And like, yeah. So then I just, from that first meeting with Jen, that's when I was just like, okay, I'm committed now. Like, I'm going to be in this.
You're in. You're in.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I think that's the thing that sometimes people forget about organizing, that part of organizing is creating like a culture of belonging, right? People want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. People want to commit themselves to something bigger than themselves. We live in this individualistic society, tries to, have everything focused on the individual, but movements are so much about the collective. and that sense of belonging. And I think that I equate it similar to ceremony, because when you first interact with ceremony, whether it be at a young age or you come into it later, you find something you've been looking for. You've been find something sometimes you don't even know you were longing for it until you found it. And I think that in the most powerful, whether they be actions or organizing spaces, you end up being able to feel that connection to, the ancestors, and the connection to like whatever we're in the middle of right now is the most important thing that we should be doing. And I think that's so fundamental when it comes to this work, because what we're battling against is hard. And so we got to be able to be a part of something, bigger than ourselves. I want to talk for a minute just about like the Red Nation's politics. Like, let's kind of just lean into that for the next couple minutes. Like, let's talk about what the Red Nation, like, what the fuck is the Red Nation about, and what y'all stand for in the world.
Sure. So first and foremost, we're a Native Liberation Organization. We are queer Indigenous feminists, which means the kind of feminism that we practice and promote is based in Indigenous worldviews. We follow Indigenous feminist intellectual traditions and grassroots traditions, which have long existed. We are internationalists. So this is why, like, the very first thing I learned about upon joining Red Nation was about Palestine. From the very beginning, it's mandatory reading to know about Palestine in Red Nation, because that is how you understand settler colonialism, because that is the premier example of an active settler colonial project. It's an active genocide right now, right? Their story is our story. And it's not just them, it's Indigenous people all over the world. We've done multiple delegations all over the world. Kylie and Dee have been to Palestine. I've had the opportunity to go to Venezuela. I visited Kanaka Maoli homelands in Hawaii. So we make it a priority to build connections and solidarity with other Indigenous people and struggles all around the world, because that is where our collective power lies. And it's our greatest dream for like all Native nations, right, who often call themselves tribes, to assert that everywhere, to assert that solidarity amongst themselves and globally. We are socialists. And so when people hear that, there's all these preconceived notions that come with that, right?
You commies.
Yeah, I know, just damn dirty commies, right? And so, but let's be real. If you look at the U.S.'s own policies and histories, we were most certainly the first damn dirty commies, just like we were the first insurgents. U.S. foreign policy, Homeland Security was built around eradicating Native people. And so, and not to mention, like, we were the... people are like, oh, you just love Marx. I'm like, dude, Marx had to look at us to develop his theories. Marx looked at the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Engels looked at Pueblo people. They looked at Kanaka Maoli people for real life examples of what a communal society could look like. So we literally predate even the theory with our praxis of how we lived. So when people call it a white man's ideology, I'm like, hey, well, where do those white men have to look?
Yeah. Where did they get their ideas off of?
Yeah.
And then where did we get our ideas off of? Natural systems, monitoring like what we seen happening in nature and depicting those in political structures.
Exactly. Like literally our material conditions. Like we are connected to our material conditions, to all of our relatives, all of our non-human relatives. And that's still at the forefront of our politics. Not to mention, socialism belongs to the colonized people of the world, right? Like, first of all, the term decolonization, that comes from Africa. That comes from like Frantz Fanon, right? That comes from the Black radical tradition. And so we need to be looking at all of these traditions of resistance to colonialism. And the most successful ones we have seen in praxis are socialist struggles for Indigenous liberation. Whether it's in Bolivia, it's in, there's examples around the world. And a great deal of effort goes into propagandizing us to believe that those projects were failures, even though the U.S. goes and puts sanctions on countries that have successful socialist projects. A place like Bolivia, where their government is indigenous fronted, where medicine people have the same status as doctors, where they have an appointed position that must be occupied by an indigenous woman at all times to confront patriarchy. Because they don't want us getting ideas, right?
Yeah.
And so we are here
Because ideas are power.
Absolutely.
They don't want us being powerful.
And it is their worst fear that we link up with other indigenous people who have these advanced, sophisticated politics and ways of upholding their traditions and culture and ways of life.
Well, right on. I think those are some of the reasons why I fuck with the Red Nation. It's why we have them on. Why we have you on the show here? Why we're on the streets together? Why we throw down to each other? So we will take a short break and we'll be right back. Well, thanks for laying that shit down, Jen. It's awesome to hear about the politics of the Red Nation, how all of you kind of came into being a part of, the Red Nation movement. And now I want to talk into, one of the most important issues globally and facing indigenous people today. It's just we're going to talk about Palestine, and we're going to talk about the Palestinian people. And we're going to talk about that there's a genocide happening, and it's happening at the hands of a colonial settler government. So yes, I said all those things in that order because that's how we're going to talk about about this issue, and this is how we're going to unpack it. And so, the Red Nation has been very active in Palestinian liberation, and want to give you all a chance to kind of talk about why it's so important and what is the Red Nation doing to support solidarity for Palestinian liberation.
So I went to Palestine in 2018. Like Jen said, it was mandatory that Red Nation members read about Palestine, learn about Palestine. But when it was time, when Red Nation selected me to go on a Palestinian delegation with Palestinian Youth Movement, that intensity of political education on Palestine, within, a month of just okay, so not only so you have a basic understanding of what's happening in Palestine, but do you know what is actually happening in Palestine? That goes into security and just you as an indigenous person. They're going into that airport, the customs, the IDF is going to question you, why are you coming into quote unquote Israel, Palestine? Why are you here? Why are you visiting? It says you're native. Why? Are you here for church? And you have to prepare yourself to answer those questions. But in this political education, it was actually Nadia Tanous wrote a paper called Scorched, or what is it called? I think it's called Scorched Earth. But it was talking about the olive trees and the significance of olive trees to Palestinian people. But Nadia, I don't know, the way Nadia wrote this paper, it read so much to me as the Scorched Earth policy that was enacted on Diné people by the U.S. Cavalry. The Scorched Earth policy, for people that don't know, is when they were rounding up Diné people for the long walk, and in order to draw Navajo people out, in order to decrease their power, they burned medicines, they burned food, they burned corn, they burned everything. That's why it's called Scorched Earth. And it made Diné people more submissive to being round up and taken to Fort Sumner, which we call Huelde. But reading this paper, I was like, oh my gosh, like, it's so similar to us. But nothing really prepared me for like what I saw in Palestine. Yes, like when you land and go through the airport, you are questioned by, the customs, and they really question you. And it's a bit nerve wracking. I don't know if I would have made it if I wasn't prepared to answer those questions. But the first thing you see is like the walls. The first thing you see is like just how, I don't know, just barricaded Palestinian people are from their homes, from their homelands. Seeing like the different zones, there's A, B, and C zones, and how hearing stories of Palestinian people like, I haven't seen my relatives in so many years because I literally can't go from this place to the other place, which is originally where I'm from. It was, I don't know. It just reminded me so much of like the stories you hear back here with Native people.
Similar to Jen, my political education from Red Nation started with Palestine. And I was elected to go on a delegation with MECA, Middle East Children's Alliance, in 2019. And prior to the delegation, I actually sat with Dr. Mel and Dee, and we read Stephen Saleda's book. And Dr. Mel would explain to us the like political analysis and landscape of Palestine, and also just being really intentional with going there, but like being a good guest on someone else's homelands. So when I got to Palestine, on the plane, I was just so nervous. But it's kind of silly, but I was nervous about like not knowing enough, or not knowing like all of the history. Am I going to slip up? Like I put a lot of pressure on myself to know those things. And then when I got there and we were, going to villages, and talking with Palestinian people, aunties, kids, uncles, I immediately I knew. I was like, I know what this is, It wasn't a debate or like something that I had to question. I just from hearing about the stories of Palestinian people's water sources being intentionally damaged or contaminated, like that to me was also something that was just like clear to me. Like, okay, this is like, these are tactics, these are strategies of genocide, and to make the indigenous peoples like dependent, because Israel also, steals their water and sells it back to them. They also control like how much water goes into the villages, into the people. So they have to just be aware of like their water usage, because they have to make it stretch, until the next delivery. And then, their farmlands, like their farming's also controlled. Some of them were like burned. So then they would have to, replant, and then like build up their farms again. And then that's also like impacted by the water that's stolen. And then like livestock. And there's the story of when Palestinians had cows, and then Israel also recognized it as like an economic resource. And so they banned cows, and Palestinians like hid, their cows from Israel, So those stories, they stuck out to me. I just knew, and I didn't have to, just like have these conflicts within myself, is this or is this not like genocide? I just knew. And then, so when I got back to the like so-called U.S., then I started making the parallels between my own people's history and what we've been through, Bosque Redondo, being imprisoned there, and just coming to the realization that all of us, we're here because our ancestors, resisted we resisted the army, pretty much, the government. My ancestor, she escaped from the imprisonment at Bosque Redondo and made her way back to our homelands. So it was making those parallels. And then in terms of, because I know there's already been comparisons to like Huelde, and it's like we were on our long journey to freedom. So are we really going to leave like Palestinians to make their long journey to freedom alone? So it's just like we need to be there with them and support them. And it's also realizing too, like, not only do we have the responsibility to know our histories and our resistance and like our stories, we have that same responsibility to other indigenous peoples who are resisting genocide, oppression, or imperialism. We have like a duty to be with them, or you know what I mean, like on their long journeys to freedom, because we were there. And so at DC, in our speech, we said that I can't remember the exact words, but it was something to the effect that we have hope for Palestine's future because we're still here. And so I think that it's not a debate, like it should, like for me, it's just like automatic that, we need to speak up, support Palestinians and their calls, like their demands. And then also just like, not like speak for them, but to allow them to speak for themselves. And then to just like elevate that, like use our resources, to adhere to basic, like BDS calls, or, writing a statement, being vocal and unafraid to, wave the Palestinian flag, things like that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the thing, like for me, I think about because of the shared history, there's like a shared responsibility. They just like they burn down the olive trees and go after. They've been following the colonizers have been following that strategy everywhere throughout the entire world when it comes to indigenous people. Go after the food source. Go after the economic system. Go after the ability for people to feed themselves. Even the control of water in Palestine. I mean, we know water is life, right? Mini Wachoni, water is life. Well, you can control the life of a people if you can control their access to water. And so when we make references to that the Palestinian people are living in an apartheid state, what we're talking about is every aspect of their life being controlled by a settler colonial government. And here in the United States, the United States is not just complicit with what's happening to the Palestinian people at the hands of the Israeli government. It is directly responsible. Mm-hmm. It is directly responsible, at the sum of, $3.2 to $3.4 billion a year coming from the United States government to the state of Israel, and 99.7% of that money going to the military aid directly. And so as we sit here as indigenous people on this land, The only reason why the United States government has the resources in the first place to be sending over there to commit genocide against the Palestinian people is because they have set up a system where they have extracted our land and resources from our land to have those resources in the first place. And that's why us as indigenous people, like it's why our resistance is bound up with theirs, and why our liberation is bound up with theirs, is because both of us are being impacted by those same exact systems. You know, when you and when you watch the gaslighting of genocide happening, the gaslighting of our people. I mean, we were once told, well, that didn't happen. You know, I'm from Porcupine, for example, Pahicinte or Porcupine, and I live 3.5 miles from Wounded Knee. And I remember when that sign said the massacre at Wounded Knee, or it said the battle at Wounded Knee. They called Wounded Knee a battle in the historical markers that were put there, and they gave the Congressional Medals of Honor, you know, to 7th Cavalry soldiers who massacred Lakota women, and mostly women and children, at Wounded Knee. And it is always that act of the colonizer to control the narrative, to try to tell the history. And that's why I think that in these moments it's important for us to speak up, because there is a narrative war happening that is directly responsible for the physical war that is happening. And that's the thing I appreciate about some of the work that the Red Nation does. It helps to unpack that. You know, you guys talk about it on your podcast and your politics, because if we allow the narrative war to continue to rev up, it creates the runway for the actual war to continue, right?
I was gonna say last summer, me and Nick Estes were working at the National Archives, and we actually got to look at the actual documents in which the U.S. Cavalry, first in their own documents, referred to Wounded Knee as a massacre, and they had to retroactively go back and change the language to call it a battle so that it was justified. So talk about revisionist history and the way we're seeing it in real time too. Like Israel's blatant lies, like that are being so easily debunked, right? Also, when I was in Venezuela, one thing we kept hearing from the elders there who survived the 2002 coup, they said the biggest thing that allowed that coup to take place was media narrative manipulation. And they emphasized about media being the most powerful weapon or tool for liberation. So I'll never forget that.
I talked about this before, and this is just something like, because I carry both identities of being Lakota and Jewish. On my father's side of the family, you know, are Jewish social justice activists, and I'm not ashamed of that. I'm proud of that history, because they stood in solidarity with indigenous liberation for a long, long time. But they also had the politics of standing in solidarity with Palestinian people. And one of the things that they often talked about, and my grandfather talked about, was, you know, I asked him at Passover one time, what does it mean to be Jewish? I know what it means to be Lakota. We got land, we got culture, we got ceremony, we got laughter, we got all of our different things that we have, you know. And, you know, he looks at me and says, well, some Jews are going to tell you what I'm about to tell you is not true. But what I will tell you is that at different points throughout history, Jewish people have experienced persecution and have survived genocide, have survived oppression. And therefore, it is a responsibility of Jewish people to stand in solidarity with those who are experiencing oppression today. And the act of doing that is being Jewish. And so that's the political lexicon for me as both a Lakota and indigenous person. As Lakota and Jewish person, I was raised up in that. And so when I see such a disconnect between the values, a disconnect of social justice values as it relates to the treatment of other indigenous people, it hits home to me. And so to me, this issue is near and dear to my heart. And so I want to, give big shout outs to the Red Nation for the stances that you have all been taking, and the people who have had the courage to stand up in this historical moment, who stood up before October 7th, who had positions on this issue when it wasn't popular, because we do open ourselves up to attacks. When we speak truth to power against these systems that are designed to try to oppress our people. And so just in closing, how do folks get tapped into the Red Nation? How can they learn more about what you all are doing? How can they hear about the podcast? Share a little bit about that.
So I'm co-host of the Red Nation podcast. You can follow our TikTok account where we share daily content from the podcast. It's just the Red Nation podcast. You can stream us on SoundCloud, Spotify. Follow our YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is like the secret place for all the gold because, that's where
that's where the gold's at.
It is. No, it really is. There's that's where we have special content. So come through. We're on... we're the Red Nation Movement on Instagram. Patreon, of course. If you want to donate to us, that is how we sustain the podcast, is via the Patreon. So become a patron, help us out. That is one way to help us do everything we do, from mutual aid to, buying supplies so we can document the things we go to, and really everything. If you want to get involved, hit us up. If you're in Albuquerque, hit us up. We also have comrades in Minneapolis. So these are the main places we're operating out of right now. If you are a Native person who wants to know more about Palestine, who wants to know more about how you can support and get involved, look up indigenousforpalestine.org. This is a collaboration between Red Nation, community members, scholars, organizations, and really all Indigenous people who are looking to stand in solidarity with Palestine. There you will be able to sign on to our letter of support. If you're looking for one concrete thing that you can do today to support Palestine, do that. It also includes a ton of resources, a ton of educational resources about Palestine. There's readings, videos, podcasts, even more links to give you more information about action you can take. So again, that's indigenousforpalestine.org. Please use this resource to continue to educate yourself and others, share around, talk to your friends and family about it. And thank you so much for supporting.
I appreciate you all for coming on the show. I want to, give shout outs to you for your hard work. This work is not easy. We have to learn how to organize people. We have to organize money. We have to organize resources. The work of Indigenous liberation, and it doesn't come easy, and it takes a toll on us. But you all are doing the thing, and y'all are doing it with your politics on your Sleeve, and I have deep appreciation for that. I've been around this movement for a long time, a little bit older than some of the folks around this table, but it's powerful to see, because I do think that a lot of times we jump into trying to take action and be involved in things without developing our political analysis of why we're doing them, And that is one of the things I'll say that I appreciate about the Red Nation, that I've seen. I can kind of tell when I met a Red Nation member, because they got some politics to them. They got some things that they believe in. And everyone I've ever met is also trying to learn, from the Conrads to the left and Conrads to the right. And so that's something I have always noticed. And also, just this past year, being able at different times to throw down with one another, to learn from one another. And, I remember actions that we rolled together, and I think it's important for folks out there to know that, that there might be all these different Indigenous groups, collectives, place-based things, but we're also part of a movement where many of us have different roles in those movements, and when we can throw down with each other, we do, and we build those relationships for the long haul too. So I appreciate all of you for being on Land Back for the People. We're gonna swap podcasts in the future, and so I've never been on the Red Nation podcast, so
Come through.
I'll come through. I don't know when I'll be in Albuquerque, but it'll happen. So appreciate you all for being on the show.
Yep, thank you so much, Nick.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it. All right. Is that a wrap? You'll find a way to peep. All right.
Nice.
This was a masterclass on the importance of Indigenous lands and lifeways, what it means to walk your rhetoric and move in lockstep with struggles around the world, and how to create a culture of belonging through organizing. I'm so honored to be on this journey together with all of you. Thanks for being in the Solidarity Index family.
People have to develop courage.
Land Back for the People is an Indian Collective original, hosted by Nick Tilson, produced by Willie White and Steph Vieira, audio editing by Willie White, and original music by Mato Wayuhi. The Solidarity Index is a production of State of Mind Media, created and produced by Jen Bell, Shalva Wise, Stina Hamlin, and yours truly, Zaire Lauren. Audio editing and production by Stina Hamlin. Audio mix by Raquel Saladivar and Matt Gundy. Logo and identity design by Marwan Kabor. Art direction, website, and additional design by Jen Bell. Our theme song, Until Everybody is Free, by Bella Cuts, is out everywhere you listen to music. All proceeds from streaming and downloads go to the Dr. Maya Angelou Foundation. I'm your host, Zaire Lauren, aka the artist El Haz. We appreciate you all for listening. Peace.
The truth is, no one of us can be free until everybody is free. No one of us can be free until everybody is free.